Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Indie Zone. My name is Kathy. Yesterday was a very crucial day in the Idaho versus Kohberger case because it was the first day of 2 full days of hearings that have been set aside on the defense's multiple motions to suppress evidence, motion to compel discovery, and also there was some testimony that was taken relative to a potential granting of a Frank's motion by the court. What happened yesterday, as we know, is that the court immediately went into closed session at the start of proceedings, 9 a.m. Ada County time, and that is when live testimony occurred relative to the motion to suppress IgG DNA evidence, and also, as the court indicated, for efficiency purposes, that he was going to entertain some live testimony as it relates to the defense's pending motion for a Frank's hearing. The 9 o'clock session involved we don't know how many witnesses. This was when live testimony evidence was going to be taken in the courtroom because both of the exhibit and witness lists that the state and the defense were required by court order to submit to the court were submitted under seal. And I know that some were saying during the course of the day, why is this taking so long? Because as you know, we were supposed to go into, which we did, open session, hearings open to the public once the closed session was done. But the disadvantage that the public has, as I've stated, is we don't know how many witnesses were called. And what happens, and I can tell you from experience, is that sometimes when you are calling a witness for either a deposition or on the stand, and you think you might just need a half hour worth of time, sometimes based on a response that someone gives, it may require 5, 6, 7 follow-up questions to clarify, because it may lead you into a path that you didn't know you were going to have to go down in order to represent your client until you hear that live testimony. So that is one of the reasons why things didn't start in the morning, I believe. Again, we're speculating, but this, based on experience, is what can happen. Secondly, some were wondering if Detective Brett Payne was one of the witnesses who were called. We don't know, because we don't know who is on the exhibit and witness list. However, I think it's a very good possibility for 2 reasons why he might have been called and did give testimony. Number one, I think I saw him in the courtroom in the afternoon closed open session following the closed session. And number 2, he was so intricately involved in the pre-arrest and post-arrest matters that we as the public know. So I think it's a very good indication that if that was him in the courtroom, he was just not there as a spectator. It was possibly because he had given testimony in the morning, which then leads to some were wondering, will Detective Payne possibly be called today? Usually if you give testimony either during a hearing, before the court, or trial, once you're done, you're excused and you can either leave or you can stay to listen to the rest of the proceedings. So if that was Detective Payne who was in the courtroom and he did in fact give testimony in the morning, I think he would have been required to leave the courtroom if there was any possibility he was going to be called back. And I don't think there's much of a potential that any witnesses will be called today, because what Judge Hippler said at the end of the day was that they're going to go into evidence in terms of exhibits that were presented to the court by both sides. So this is where although more evidence will be presented, this is not in the form of actual live testimony. This is going to deal with discovery, exhibits that were produced to the court in anticipation of these hearings. Third, I've been asked to give some of my opinions on what I saw during the open session, and I'd like to reserve that until tomorrow. I'm going to be doing a live close-up session to kind of go over the first 2 days of proceedings, and since we're just in the middle, I don't want to give any thoughts, any opinions. I think we got a lot of good indication from Judge Hippler as to how he might be ruling on the IGG issue yesterday and some other issues just based on his questioning of the two attorneys. As you know, it was Ashley Jennings who, in the afternoon session anyway, presented on behalf of the state of Idaho, and Ann Taylor on behalf of Mr. Kohberger. We don't know which attorneys represented the parties during the closed session, of course. But what we can anticipate for today will be, I think, a series of really important hearings and a continuation of the first time that we're hearing a lot of things as the public as to what the evidence is in this case, just based on what the attorneys, what Judge Hippler stated during yesterday's hearing. So if you do have an opportunity, please tune in today if you're interested in the case. I think we're going to learn a lot more about the case today and what the evidence is or may be against Mr. Kohberger. And do join us Saturday. It's going to be 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's tomorrow, where we're going to do just a wrap-up session of what we saw, what we heard. Take your questions, any comments that you may have about the case. I welcome. So until then, this is Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us here today.